President.
Senator from Oregon.
Mr. President, before I begin my remarks, I just want to make sure that everyone understands that Senator Murray has been on this floor hour after hour after hour for a reason. And that is these nominations are enormously important, and this one is right at the heart of what families and parents and communities want, because it deals with education. I heard that again this weekend, Mr. President. I had 3 town hall meetings, mostly rural areas. We had record turnouts. As Senator Murray knows, Oregon and Washington have just gotten pounded here in the last few weeks with bad weather. Had to fly all night to get back for this debate. And everybody said how important this was, because they understand what Betsy DeVos, if she is confirmed, would mean for our country. And I want to start by putting a focus on this issue around what Oregonians are particularly concerned about this morning. They are concerned, when we talk about education, about boosting our high school graduation rates. And parents, and teachers, and communities are all mobilized. And I want to start my remarks by saying that I know people across the country are concerned about this. We work very closely with Senator Murray and Senator Alexander on this. And the reason that Oregonians feel so strongly is that we have been first in so many areas. For example, protecting our natural treasures. But we're not where we want to be in terms of high school graduation rates. And so for communities across Oregon, the business community, Democrats, Republicans, liberals, conservatives, independents, you name it, it is top priority business for our state to improve high school graduation rates. That's because we understand that getting those graduation rates up is crucial to making sure that young people can be better prepared for their next step, whether that's college, whether it's workforce, anything that they want to do. And I want to start my remarks with respect to the DeVos nomination very specifically. I do not believe improving high school graduation rates can be built on a foundation of alternative facts. Yet that is what Betsy DeVos has been promoting. For example, she recently told the Senate that graduation rates at virtual private schools which she has invested in, were almost twice as high as the actual graduation rates at those schools. She said that at the Nevada Virtual Academy, there was a graduation rate of 100%. The actual graduation rate is 57%. She claimed that at the Ohio Virtual Academy, there was a graduation rate of 92%. The actual rate is 46%. I think this pretty much qualifies as a set of alternative facts. But at home, at the kind of town meetings that I just had this weekend, people would probably call them 4 Pinocchio falsehoods and ideological hocus pocus. The alternative facts just may be the DeVos way, but they aren't the Oregon way. As I said to Oregonians this weekend, we had teachers and community leaders come to these meetings. What we do is we operate on something we call the Oregon way. The Oregon way is about Democrats and Republicans, people of all philosophies. We had great Republican governors, Tom McCall, Mark Hatfield, who also served in this body, and we're independent. We want fresh, practical approaches, and we focus on our ideas that work, ideas that get results, and we focus not on alternative facts, but on the truth. So what I heard again this weekend at home is that we're bringing together teachers in the classrooms and parents and community leaders and trying to determine what are the key factors in why students are not graduating. And at home, people are asking, how do you get results? What actually is going to work in the classroom and at our schools? Educators and principals tell me that mentoring programs work. They tell me at home that summer learning programs work. They point out the track record of after-school programs. And they've got the facts, Mr. President, to back them up. These facts aren't alternative facts. They're not inflated graduation rates, the way Betsy DeVos told the Senate. These are based on actual studies that have shown that youth, especially at-risk youth with mentors, are more likely to join extracurricular activities, take on leadership roles at school, or to volunteer in their communities. After-school and summer learning programs, again, very solid track records, providing a safe place to learn and keeping low-income and at-risk youngsters on a path towards graduation. Those same educators have told me in my town halls that they oppose elevating Betsy DeVos into a job with the important responsibility of steering the future of our nation's children. And the reason they have expressed these views is much like what I have stated to the Senate, and that is that the evidence, not alternative facts, but hard evidence, doesn't back up many of the judgments Betsy DeVos has made in guiding her work in this field. In Oregon, citizens, thousands of them, worry that the confirmation of Betsy DeVos is going to make it harder to help students succeed in the classroom and graduate from high school. Now, this graduation rate for us in Oregon, Mr. President, and I'm sure we're not alone, takes on a new and important urgency because of the changes that were made last year, bipartisan changes Senator Murray and Senator Alexander made in the Pass Every Student Succeeds Act. And the whole point of this bill is, of course, there's great frustration across the country with Leave No Child Behind, the predecessor. And I remember at one point illustrating the frustration with that law. We had a wonderful school in rural Oregon, mostly low-income youngsters, mostly minority youngsters. They worked like crazy. Their parents were very involved. Their teachers just rolled up their sleeves, and they were doing very well at getting their test scores up. And at one point, we were told they were going to be labeled a failing school because apparently for a short period of time, a number of youngsters had the flu, and so the attendance rate wasn't what it should be. Those were the kinds of stories that illustrated why it was so important to fix Leave No Child Behind, focus on approaches that work, and it's my view that what Senator Murray and Senator Alexander did with respect to bipartisan leadership around an important bill, important for the future of students, important for their ability to get a job, do what they want in their years ahead. When you have a bipartisan bill, which the president has signed into law, replacing failed education policies and giving teachers more control over their classrooms, you ought to move quickly and boldly to carry out that law. And that law included a provision that I wrote to help high schools with low graduation rates turn around student achievement by putting the most disadvantaged students on a path to success. It allows local educators. This isn't run by Washington, D.C. I'm always hearing, everybody's talking about having it run from Washington, D.C. That's not what I voted for. What I voted for, and a majority of senators voted for, was a fresh approach allowing local educators to promote and expand on programs and policies that actually work in their community. They recognize that what works in Coos Bay or Roseburg, Oregon, may not necessarily work in Tallahassee. And so we wrote a bipartisan bill to come up with approaches tailored to what local educators want to pursue. And I think now, as we're moving to see this law implemented, and states and schools across the country are moving to implementation, it's more important than ever that the Senate get this right, that we get it right now, and that we use approaches grounded in the facts and grounded in the reality of public education. My concern is, based on Betsy DeVos's record, which I have looked at length, that bipartisan work could be undercut by a system that has not been shown to improve academic outcomes for students. In Detroit, Ms. DeVos has spent years advocating for a voucher system that gives scarce taxpayer dollars to private and religious schools. Her efforts have essentially left public schools to do more for their students with less of the funding they desperately need. Now, I was on a program this morning, a radio program. They were discussing the views of various senators on this, and I heard discussion of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle describing the fact that they were supportive of Ms. DeVos because they thought her unconventional approaches and her fresh ideas were a real advantage in her having this position. Mr. President, I don't take a backseat to anybody in terms of being for unconventional approaches. I think it would be fair to say that pretty much most of my time in public life has been defined by taking unconventional approaches. So I welcome new ideas, ideas from people who've not been involved in government, and ideas that, frankly, are out of the box, that are unconventional. But they still have to be based on hard evidence that they're going to work. We're trying fresh approaches in Medicare, for example. The idea is that Medicare today is no longer the Medicare of 1965. It's all about chronic disease, cancer, diabetes, and heart disease, and strokes. And a big bipartisan group of us here in the Senate have written bipartisan legislation to try a very different approach, certainly unconventional, but it's grounded on the facts. It's grounded on what we know about taking care of folks at home and on the benefits of telemedicine. And so that is why I'm opposing the DeVos nomination, not because I'm hostile to unconventional approaches or fresh faces or people who haven't been involved in government. Quite the contrary. I probably have a bit of a bias for just that. I'm opposing the nomination because of the track record that much of what she has advocated for hasn't worked, number one. And number two, when she was challenged on it, such as the question of the graduation rates in some of those programs she invested in, she inflated their rates. She said they were almost twice as high as they actually were. So the country can't afford to allow failed policies, particularly as we move to implement the new law that, in particular, do not suggest a very positive set of opportunities for public schools at the local level. We've recognized as a nation for years how vital public education is to giving children in America the chance to climb the economic ladder. It is a bedrock principle of public education that an investment in public schools, an investment where there's a track record of fresh ideas that work, rather than ideological approaches where the evidence suggests it doesn't work. When you make those investments, you can serve everyone. I cannot support an education secretary with a track record that flies in the face of the need for our country to make smart investments in public schools. I've described how the next education secretary faces a challenging agenda with huge stakes, and graduation rates and improving them are right at the heart of it. But obviously, we're going to have a need for other fresh ideas, making college more affordable. Ms. DeVos just doesn't have the qualifications to achieve the success that 50 million students in American public schools demand. The person entrusted with our children's future should not be put at the head of the class just because she is part of a family that wields enormous public influence. You get these jobs because you earn them, because you have been involved in your community in various kinds of charitable or philanthropic efforts, and your work produces concrete, tangible results that indicate that you can carry out a job of this importance. The reality is, Mr. President, these nominations are some of the most important judgments we make as a Senate. The people we put in these offices are going to control literally billions of dollars in spending. They are going to enforce laws that in some instances are decades and decades old, and at a minimum, update the ones that need updating. And I can tell you what I heard again this weekend in rural Oregon indicates that the people I have the honor to represent do not believe Betsy DeVos is up for the job. So this morning, I stand up for kids and parents and families who deserve education policies that will let them go after their dreams and secure their futures. And I believe they deserve better. I believe Betsy DeVos is going to make it harder for working families to achieve those aspirations. That is why I will vote this morning against the nomination of Betsy DeVos to be Secretary of Education. I encourage my colleagues to do the same. I yield the floor.